please help me welcome our next guest, the co-founder and CEO of Cohere, Aidan Gomez. Great to see you again. So you can help me with what I think is the question on the mind of a lot of folks here in Davos, which is, all businesses are being told from the board down, you got to do AI. AI's big. They spent, a year doing experiments. They spent, I think most of last year trying to move those into production. And a lot of them are still feeling that they're getting stuck. So help us understand. You work obviously exclusively on enterprise AI. Where are companies finding success, and when they are struggling, what tends to be why they're struggling?
Yeah, well, in particular, Cohere works in what we describe as critical industries, so the ones that are the most security sensitive, public sector, financial services, telco, et cetera. And so for them, we have seen broad, large-scale deployments. We've seen customers 100x the scale of, an initial pilot pool of tens or hundreds of users to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of users within the organization. What we're seeing as the major blockers are largely compliance related. So whether it's data security or checks and balances, monitoring of these agents, making decisions around what should humans always be in the loop for versus what are we comfortable completely outsourcing to an agent. So our platform is built to tolerate that and be very controllable in terms of setting those autonomy policies, but it's still a broad barrier across industries.
And, I'm asking everyone this, so you're not the only one I'm asking the bubble question to, but I feel like that's another big thing that's going to come up constantly, is this idea that there may be a bubble in AI. And again, I think when we're talking about a bubble, that doesn't necessarily mean AI isn't good, AI isn't real, AI isn't big. It's really a mathematical economics question of, are we investing the right amount for the returns we can get over a reasonable amount of time? And I'm curious, in that lens, do you think there is a bubble, and if so, where in the ecosystem does it lie?
Cohere takes a different strategy than some of the other players in the space. We don't actually build out the infrastructure for serving our models. Our customers do that. So we give them the software, we give them the models, the platform around those models, but we don't build the data centers to deploy it. And so we're not as close to that side of the picture as some of the other guys are. You're completely right. It's not a question of whether AI is effective. It's incredibly effective. It's only going to increase from here. The question is about utilization. How much compute do we need? How fast? And whether the projects that are underway are timed appropriately to the realities of the market. I don't know. That is the short answer to the question. I don't know whether it's a bubble in terms of AI infrastructure. I can say there still needs to be a lot more from where we are today, but the numbers that you and I see in the press about what's being signed up for, I don't know if those are reasonable in terms of like the next 2-3 years.
But you're kind of happy you're not
not
paying
in that business.
bill.
Yeah.
We'll talk about where you're taking Cohere, because I feel like in the early days of AI, there weren't that many big name, and so we would constantly hear about you guys. And I don't feel like I hear the name Cohere come up as much, but as you mentioned, your customers aren't necessarily the ones that are getting talked about. They're definitely not consumers, and they tend to be not just enterprises, but enterprises in, kind of state-regulated industries. Where are you taking Cohere? What's been happening behind the scenes? Where is your growth headed?
Yeah, we've been squarely focused on the enterprise. And I think because we don't do these massive, tens of billions, hundreds of billions compute deals, maybe we stay out of some of the headlines. I would say that's a good thing about our business. That's a feature, not a bug. But our focus has been on security, ensuring that companies have full control over their AI systems. So they deploy the models in their environment. Cohere has no ability to observe data flowing through it or shut it off. And so in the new realities of the geopolitical landscape, that's increasingly important, is this notion of sovereignty and resiliency. So Cohere's deployment method and the fact that we're Canadian has been a huge, boon to that.
Well, that's literally where I was going next, eh? Is in this environment, which I've heard is a little turbulent on the geopolitical front. AI is obviously more strategic. enterprises and governments care a ton about sovereignty, data residency. How is that affecting buying decisions, and is it a benefit? Are you seeing specific business that you're winning because you're not a US company, or maybe not even a US or Chinese company?
Yeah, I think resilience is a huge priority now globally. The past year has sort of woken everyone up to the reality that we're going to have to carry our weight. We can't all depend on a single country, a single liberal democracy, and there does need to be, you know, more than just one country carrying the weight in AI. And so in that sense, Cohere has become a focal point of one of the few companies outside the United States which is able to deliver the services and has developed the capability to build these models. I think it's only going to become even more critical and important. And that's why we focused on these critical sectors, like the sort of pillars of the economy, including public sector. It's because those customers, it is a national security concern, right? Like telecoms, the communication of your public, all of their text back and forth in financial services, every single financial interaction in energy, the grid, and being able to protect those systems, their architectures, et cetera. All of that is a national security concern. And Cohere is one of the only companies on the planet that can deploy securely enough to meet those organizations' needs.
And how global is the business? I think, so we sat down, I think it was 2 years ago in Davos. You had this tiny apartment and we met, and then we chatted on stage last year. How global?
We still have that tiny
You still have that? It's great. It's a great apartment. How global is the business? Give us a sense for your scale. And also, I think you were expanding internationally, maybe to, I feel like, Asia for the first time. One of the times we chatted. Where are things at?
Yeah, we have fantastic partners like Fujitsu in Japan, LG in Korea, and we've grown a lot into Europe. So I think this time last year, our revenue was something like 80% US concentrated. And at this point, that's come down to less than half, while also more than doubling in size. And so there's been massive rest of world growth for us in Canada, in Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia. But yeah, we have offices all over the place. I think the latest we opened up was in Seoul. And before that, it was Paris. So very rapidly expanding. We expect to like double headcount this year. And I think that is driven by these changes and the broad awareness that each country cannot depend on a single other country. They need to spread their bets and make sure that they're resilient in the event that one of those gets switched off.
And a lot of the other discussion is around sort of build versus buy on a couple dynamics. You know, infrastructure is one, but also the models themselves. And I was talking to May Habib earlier today. You know, Writer still makes a bunch of their own models. And, you know, help me think how you're thinking about, like, how important are the models as a differentiator, especially for companies when you're competing against OpenAI, Anthropic, the companies that just have these massive resources to pour into the biggest large language models. Where is there room for companies to innovate on models? You know, does that shift over time of who needs to own the model?
I think it's essential that Cohere controls our model full stack. Like we build it completely from scratch. So we have no external dependencies other than chips, right? Like we don't build our own chips. That is crucial, in particular because it's a capability that our customers are buying. Often the off-the-shelf, generic, out-of-the-box models aren't good enough at the tasks that they're trying to pursue. And so Cohere has to come in and customize on top of their data. And so there's that, the out-of-the-box solution doesn't go far enough piece that we're able to solve because of the fact we build it from scratch and can control every layer of the stack, whether it's post-training, mid-training, pre-training.
And where does it become challenging for you all to have to compete at the model level against some of these household names? Again, you have the benefit of focus, you have the benefit of working directly with your customers a little more, and they can run it on their own. You're not housing it. I would say the flip side is you're competing against these massive companies.
For the models, it's actually like a lot of their capital is not being deployed against the language model itself. There's exercises like, you know, consumer hardware devices. There's like, you know, training chips that they're developing. There's everything else, including actually serving these models to their customers, which is a enormously expensive endeavor. And so huge swaths of their capital is actually going in that direction. If you look at the model training costs, it's a tiny slice of the overall picture. And so in that arena, Cohere is extremely competitive. And in general, if you've looked over the past 2 years, models have sort of converged to the same fixed point, to the point where customers can't really tell the difference between them. It's becoming a coin toss or marginal. And so I think that trend has shifted spend elsewhere. Same thing at Cohere. Like we've invested heavily in go-to-market and other areas of the business. But on the modeling front, we compete extremely healthily there.
And where do you think you're going to spend a lot of your time in 2026? What are the strategic priorities and what are the challenges when you look at, I want to be here, when we're sitting on stage, what do you want to have accomplished and what's it going to take to get there when we either meet at your fabulous apartment or back here on stage?
So I think it's essential that the world has model providers that are in different countries, and Cohere is essential in that respect. What I hope is that the world adopts Cohere as a fundamental part of their critical industry infrastructure. That's what AI is becoming. It's becoming an essential part of running your business, making decisions, empowering your employees, and you shouldn't have a single line of dependence on any one country. And so we want to help the world diversify and be more resilient as a product of it.
And so I've said this before today for folks who've been in the room. One of the things I love about writing a daily AI newsletter is I get to like raise one issue each day that maybe people haven't thought about or talk about. And one of the things I like to do here in Davos is kind of get a reality check. Like, what aren't we talking about enough? I mean, there's certainly, we are talking about AI enough. Like, all we talk about is AI. But within this very fast-moving, very dynamic, life-altering field, there's a lot of nuances that some get maybe too much attention, but others don't. What's not getting enough attention?
You know, I think the field is broadly aware of some of the critical constraints, like the notion that, you know, you asked me about an AI bubble. I think people are aware of the potential breakpoints inside the industry. The question is, how much visibility do we get into those breakpoints? I think it's extremely opaque. Like even financial reporting in public companies, you know, you don't actually see the full picture. And so continued awareness and tracking of that, I think, is going to be important, especially as, you know, debt that was taken on in 2025 comes to maturity over the next 2-3 years.
And do you think, I mean, on the consumer side, on the human beings using it at the consumer level, like we've seen what that cost can be. We've seen some tragic cases where AI systems have encouraged suicide or fueled delusions. But on the business side, we generally are still hearing about businesses, oh, you're not investing enough. We haven't heard about these spectacular failures. And I'm curious, is this the year we see a company really publicly fall on its face because they did the wrong thing with AI?
Not a Cohere customer, but yeah, you know, I think it's a worthwhile concern. In general, I would say enterprises are far more conservative than consumers in where they adopt and deploy it. One of the major barriers to adoption is fear within the enterprise, fear of risk, not having enough control, not having enough visibility. And so those concerns, while they might hold back adoption, they really do protect against the downside of the types of risks that you're describing.
And what about on the geopolitical front? What would you like to see? You know, I remember, you know, Davos said this a couple of years ago, and I'm going to be fortunate enough to get to talk to him here in a day or two. But, you know, that as we get closer to really super intelligence, we're going to need more international cooperation, more cooperation among companies, more agreement on what we want these systems to look like. And it feels to me like, if anything, those conversations were more vibrant. A couple of years ago, you know, there was Bletchley and there was Seoul. And then by the time we got to Paris, it was like a trade show. It was not, everyone was just like, please build your data center here. You know, what do you hope for in terms of discussions around making sure we get the AI that we want, especially as it becomes incredibly persuasive, incredibly powerful?
Yeah, I hope there's a sort of re-normalization across the Western sphere. I hope that Canada and the United States can be best friends again. That's really, like, if I had one wish for 2026, that would be it. I think it's a really unique relationship. So much strength has come out of it. Restoring that partnership is something I hope to see. On the AI front, I really hope that cooperation continues. I think there are still very good, dedicated people in all of those countries that have contributed to this discussion, continuing that work. Despite all the noise and the different things that have happened, that work has continued and will continue. It's a bit more behind the scenes, like you say, but it's continuing. We're trying to contribute to it, and I just hope that it doesn't get stopped or slowed down.
Well, let's maybe leave it on that optimistic note. Thank you. Everyone, give a round of applause
Thank you.
for Aidan Gomez.